I went on antibiotics for Lyme and eventually felt like they were doing more harm on my body than good. I went on a gut healing protocol, which was called the GAPS diet. And within just a few short weeks of being on that diet, I could tell improvements in my health.
The foundation is gut health because it houses so much of our immunity and it's so connected to every other part of our body.
What happens in the gut is that when you have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, they start teaming up together and they build what's called a biofilm. It makes it really hard for any good bacteria to get in. I kind of break down gut health into two different ways. I think there's a diet to eat for healing the gut, and there's a diet to eat for supporting the gut.
How do you know when your gut lining is healed?
I think it just depends on the timing and
Hello friends, welcome back to Cancer Proof Living. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Michelle, an 8-year non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer survivor, mom, and certified integrative nutrition health coach. And after cancer, I wanted more than just survival, so I built the healing roadmap that I couldn't find. Now I guide survivors and cancer-conscious humans to detox, rebuild, and thrive. I sat down with Carley Smith in this episode, and we talked about gut health in such a simple way, you guys. She told us how she healed her Lyme disease and uses the GAPS diet to heal the gut. She gives amazing takeaways on how to begin to heal the gut and shares some super easy tips you can start implementing into your diet and lifestyle today. This was such a significant episode, full of information. Carley Smith, aka the Fairy Gut Mother, is a nutritional therapist, certified gut and psychology syndrome GAPS practitioner, and a registered yoga teacher. Carley became interested in health and nutrition after being diagnosed with Lyme disease and using food as medicine, emphasizing gut health and the GAPS diet to heal. She became so empowered by the progress of her healing based on diet and lifestyle changes that emphasize gut health that she started her business, Fairy Gut Mother, to help other people. Carley is adamant about promoting a gut health lifestyle and has been a featured guest on The Dr. Oz Show and a frequent guest on Colorado's own Channel 2 News in Great Day, Colorado. She has also been featured on Arizona Family TV, Better Connecticut, NBC Miami, QC Life Charlotte, and River City Live in Jacksonville, Florida. Her articles have been published in major international publications, including Newsmax, Mind Body Green, Yoga and Life Magazine, and Paleo Magazine. She also leads numerous workshops, public speaking events, and cooking demonstrations focused on gut health. Carley is passionate about making gut healthy living both practical and accessible. In addition to her educational platform, she offers a line of freshly prepared, gut-healing meal prep options made with clean ingredients and ships nationwide throughout her website. Her meals reflect the same principles she teaches: nutrient-dense, free of seed oils and harmful additives, and designed to support optimal digestion and overall wellness. So grab a pen and paper because you will definitely need it for this episode. Let's get it started. Hi, Carley. How are you today?
Hi, good to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on. The listeners are in for a treat. And I'm ready to dive right in because I think like a lot of people in this space and like the integrative space and functional space, we all have these kind of like pain to purpose stories, right? And I think your story is it's so unique. And I know that it led you to working in this gut health world, and it's just deeply personal to you. Can you take us back to the beginning and share what you were experiencing with your health before you found this path and kind of got to where you're at today?
Sure, you bet. So, just like you said, I was struggling with some health issues. At that time, I didn't know what was going on. I basically kind of like lost all cognitive function. I forgot where I lived driving home from work one day. And I was ended up menstrual bleeding for like 4 months straight. They were just putting me on all different kinds of birth control, trying to figure out what was wrong. And I eventually developed a bacterial infection from bleeding so much they put me on a very high dose of antibiotics. And then I had a reaction to the antibiotics, and the doctor thought, well, that sounds like a allergic reaction. Take stopped taking the antibiotics. And it was a friend of mine that had mentioned that sounded like Herx, which is a die-off when you take antibiotics for Lyme disease. And it basically just feels like the flu times a million. And they said, maybe you should get tested for Lyme. And I thought at this point, I kind of thought I was dying. So I was like, I'll get tested for anything. And then found out I had Lyme, and it was kind of a relief in a way to actually find that there was, something. So it kind of gave me a starting point, because at that point I had been sick for, almost going on 2 years trying to kind of figure out what was going on. And then I went on, antibiotics for Lyme, which at that time was the most common. This was back in 2015, kind of the most common, 2014 common treatment for Lyme disease, and eventually felt like they were doing more harm on my body than good. So I just thought, there has to be another way. So I went off of all my medication and I just started doing research. And, back in 2014, there really wasn't a lot of information about gut health, which is kind of like a blessing and a curse. It was kind of nice because I wasn't bombarded with so much information, but it was hard to find alternative therapies. So I went on a gut healing protocol, which was called the GAPS diet. And it was an elimination and reintroduction diet designed to heal the gut. And within just a few short weeks of being on that diet, I could tell improvements in my health, and I knew that this was going to work. And I never really looked back. So, kind of led me into what I'm doing now and helping people through gut health.
That is so crazy. I can only imagine how scary it would be to lose cognitive function. Like, that's probably the most jarring thing anybody could go through. If you're driving home and you're like, where am I? What's going on? Was that and the menstrual bleeding normal? Are those like typical signs of Lyme?
Great question. No, not at all. That was not anything that anyone thought to test at that point. But from what I've learned and all the people that I have spoken with since then, and people that have had Lyme, it seems to be a little bit more common, but it's not usually a red flag. Hey, you should get tested for Lyme. Usually Lyme people will notice a tick bite or swelling in their joints, a lot of brain fog, which I did have, but I think the menstrual bleeding for sure was not affecting, the hormonal effects that I had was not usually a common red flag for Lyme. But I do think there's more awareness around Lyme disease. I think more people are testing for it now, but certainly at that time, it was not at anybody's top concern.
Is it just a blood test to see if you have Lyme disease?
Yes. So I went to what's called Lyme literate doctor. So you want to go to somebody that's well-versed in Lyme disease that can help. And I went to her and had the test done and read with her. But, Lyme typically is kind of what they say in your body forever, and it can kind of go dormant. And so, I think that's why gut health is so important that, I could have had this for, I don't know how long, but I went through a really long period of stress and probably wasn't taking the best care of myself. And that affects gut health, and my immune system weakened and the disease flourished. So, that's why I believe so strongly in gut health. And that, that's why what drew me to it was that, well, if I can heal my gut and boost my immune system and suppress the disease, what would that look like? And so I think that's why, I'm so passionate about gut health, that it really truly is the foundation for our health.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's just literally like I tell my clients, it's like a house, right? And the foundation is gut health. And then the legs of the house, the walls, like protein and all the other things that we sprinkle in there. But the foundation is gut health because it houses so much of our immunity and it's so connected to every other part of our body. And you're right, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, there was I don't want to say there was no information about gut health, but it wasn't being talked about the way it is now. And social media wasn't what it was back then like it is now. I know after my cancer journey, I really struggled with gut health. That's what I'm such a magnet to gut health because I had so many issues through it post chemo. And that was 8 years ago. So same thing, very little information. I had to really dig deep, and now it's very different, which is kind of good and bad. There's, always two sides to the coin, but I think that I can only imagine what you went through, especially 10 or 11 years ago, going through all that. And even through the conventional side with the conventional doctors who only know what they know, right? And it's like, well, this has to work because these are the only protocols that we have, the antibiotics. Did you feel, you mentioned, or you said in your story that you felt like the antibiotics were kind of like working against you and it was just taking such a toll on your body? What do you mean by that? Like, what was happening?
I started having a lot of different side effects from the antibiotics. So, just I had my back broke out into this like terrible rash, and I was having all these gut issues and just so many problems that I had never had before. So then I was prescribed all these medications for all the side effects of everything from the antibiotics. And so it was like 20 some medications I was taking. I mean, it just felt like I was taking medications for my medications, and, I wasn't even treating Lyme disease at this point. And I felt like I was worse than when I started. So that's kind of when I was like, let's just clean the slate. I mean, I can't get any worse potentially. So let's just stop everything and let me just regroup and kind of see what happens. And but yeah, and not to say that the antibiotics there isn't some benefits to them that it didn't do some good. I mean, I'm not completely against it, but I think it's one of those things where diet and lifestyle play such a huge role in our health that you can't take that. You can't solve anything without dealing with that first. And it should be the foundation really in everything that we do. And in addition to, and I know more doctors now are including it in their practice, and especially with chemo and different treatments that, okay, it's really important to be taking a probiotic or doing little things to help mitigate some of those side effects. So I think it's becoming more discussed now than it ever was, which is great. But, it truly is that starting point, like you say, the house, and then you kind of peel back the layers from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no substitute for nutrition and lifestyle. There's just no substitute for it. You have to start there. So you mentioned the GAPS diet, right? And I know that you're a certified GAPS practitioner. Tell us what the GAPS diet is and how you found it. Who's it for? I'm very interested in this diet because I've never heard of the GAPS diet. But after I personally looked into it, I was like, oh, it's, I know what it is. I just didn't know there was a name for it. So tell us about it.
It's a lot like carnivore, which is super trendy now, so, but it is a diet. It's an elimination and reintroduction diet. It was founded by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. It's based off of the specific carbohydrate diet. And essentially, you eliminate most foods in the initial stages, and you're really just doing meat stock, which is a little bit different than a bone broth. It's more meat centric. So think of like a whole chicken simmered in water with your, a couple vegetables or anything like that. And then that meat stock is sort of the central part of the diet. You're sipping on that. You're incorporating that into all your cooking. It's more animal-based protein focused because what you're doing is you're extracting all those nutrients from the proteins and, the cartilage, the connective tissue, all those proteins, which are helpful in maintaining a healthy gut lining, rebuilding the walls of the gut lining, but also the cells in the body, the structure of our body. It's consuming what our body is made of. So think of it's basically the building blocks to repair the body. And so those are those initial stages. It's just lots of meat stock, cooked meats. If you can tolerate cooked vegetables, I like to do a lot of blended soups. I call them kind of pre-digested. So they're cooked and blended together. So they're much easier on the gut to digest. And then you start slowly incorporating into the stages. So, you'll do the meat stock, the broth and the meats for a while. Then you can start to slowly incorporate eggs and fermented foods and homemade sauerkraut or homemade yogurt, homemade dairy, those types of things that it's much easier to digest for the gut, but it's also populating the gut with that good bacteria, healing the gut lining, and then moving at your own body's pace. So moving at, when you're ready to move on to the next stage, you start incorporating the next food. How do you know when you're ready? It's usually how the body feels. You want to make sure that you're not having any gut issues. You feel like your gut feels like you're tolerating these foods, and then you can start to incorporate that next stage. But it's a 2-year diet. It can be up from 1 to 2 years. It just kind of depends on the individual. And then you move into what's called full GAPS diet, which is a lot more foods that you can incorporate and tolerate. But still some of those same principles where everything is made from scratch and much cleaner and nourishing for the body.
So how many stages are there in total?
So it's really those first few initial stages where, it's like the meat stock, the broth, the fermented foods, then you incorporate eggs. And then there's something called GAPS pancakes, which you can incorporate a little bit of nut butter and some butternut squash and make those into kind of pancakes. Then you start to get into more full GAPS diet, cooking. So those stages, it's really kind of depends on your body and how you move through them. Time frame, it may be, a week for some people, but those that have severely compromised guts, it may be, a few weeks, a month, just kind of moves at the pace with your own body.
And so if people are like, I'm having gut issues, I don't know how bad they are, I don't know what this looks like from a scale of 1 to 10, can you give us an idea of what some normal gut issues are and what the extreme is so people can kind of gauge of where they're at if they are experiencing symptoms?
Well, I think if you're experiencing any gut dysfunction, I think it's a red flag that you should tend to gut health, because though what I see a lot of times is people will, maybe get sick, get food poisoning and not think much of it and not do anything to support their gut health. And then a few months later, a year later, it just continues to get worse, because what happens in the gut is that when you have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, they start kind of teaming up together and they build what's called a biofilm. Essentially, it's like digestive plaque to protect themselves. So it makes it really hard for any good bacteria to get in. And then it will eventually start wearing away at the gut lining, causing a permeable gut lining, or what's called leaky gut. So then you get toxins and undigested foods, all sorts of things seeping into the system. So even if you just notice that you may have some, initial maybe troubles digesting your foods, or, some sort of irritable bowel, those initial stages is when you need to be thinking about gut health and getting things back on track, because the longer you wait, the worse it gets, and then the harder it gets to heal. And then when I people will always ask me, well, how long is this going to take to heal? And, there's no set amount of time, but I tell people however long you haven't been feeling well, you have to give yourself at least that time to heal. It's one of the biggest problems I see is inconsistency with people, that, they will jump into something for gut health or a gut healing protocol and then don't stick to it. A week later, they're back to eating some of their old foods. And that's that consistency of constantly incorporating these gut healing foods over longer periods of time is what's going to do the actual healing.
Yeah, definitely. I could see that people can slip back so much. Food is so emotional to people. It's so connecting for people. It's traditions, it's so much. So it's hard to sometimes commit, So people would experience, let's talk about gut. When we say gut issues or any kind of issues digesting food, bloating, you said IBS symptoms. So even extreme diarrhea or constipation. What else would fall into this category?
Any type of digestive issues, trouble digesting foods, even food allergies, food intolerances, that can definitely be a red flag for gut health. Even things that aren't related to the gut can be gut issue. So skin issues, even just energy levels, fatigue, weight gain. I mean, weight loss is located in the gut. Certain species of bacteria have been linked to your body's ability to maintain a healthy weight. So many things can be traced back to gut health. Again, it goes back to it being, the foundation, but certainly like how you feel, how you digest your foods is all gut related.
Yeah. I remember when I had leaky gut, I had so much anxiety, like unwarranted anxiety, which I know is very much connected to the gut health, but also a lot of food sensitivities to stuff I would never normally be sensitive to, and brain fog and like all of those things too. So I love that you said that, because it really, yes, you're having those physical symptoms of, constipation or bloating or, things of that nature, but it's also, no, it can go far beyond, right? It can be part of our mental and emotional health and skin rashes and, things that are happening topically in our body too, that can all stem back to gut issues. It really does affect everything.
Oh, sure. And, it can be so frustrating for people too. If you do like a food allergy test and it comes back with all these sensitivities and you think, oh my gosh, what can I eat? I'm sensitive to everything. And, food allergies and food sensitivities are two different things. So food allergy is, you are allergic to peanuts and you have an EpiPen and, it's catastrophic if you have them. But food intolerances are something like you're sensitive to it. And that usually stems from dysfunction of the gut or leaky gut. Those foods are entering into the system, the body mounts an attack on it. So usually when you work to heal the gut lining and repopulating the gut with that good bacteria, you can start to tolerate these foods again. So I think that's a thing too for a lot of people that feel so frustrated that they can't digest foods, that they can't tolerate certain foods. And so if you really work to heal the gut, you can start incorporating these foods again.
So for the GAPS diet, I'm interested in learning. First of all, I'm surprised to hear that it's meat stock based and not like bone broth, like based.
Yes. So that's kind of a big misconception with GAPS diet. And not to say that bone broth isn't good for you. I mean, I use the terminology interchangeably a lot, but when we talk about GAPS diet, we're really focused more on meat stock. And it's essentially larger cuts of meat with a bone in, but it's not heavily focused on the bones. And so a few reasons for that. It's a little bit easier to tolerate, in those initial stages when the gut is a little bit more prone to issues. So it's just more healing, but you're extracting all those nutrients, the cartilage, the proteins that are essentially what your body is made of. It's the building blocks of our bodies. And that's what's needed to actually repair the tissues and repair the gut lining. So yes, it's meat stock in those initial stages. And then, you can move more into bone broth, but even just sticking with more of like a meat stock, and by meat stock, you could just do a whole chicken or a big roast with a bone in. So it's not overly complicated. And then shorter cooking times. So instead of, what I think is most commonly people think, 24 hours, a day or two, it can be just, 4 to 6 hours until the meat is cooked, up to 8 hours, something like that.
Put it in a crock pot and let it roast, right?
Yes. And it's the simpler, the better, and I think that's the main idea is that really the foundation of gut health is fairly simple, healing the gut lining, populating gut with good bacteria. And to do that, it's, it's simple cooking techniques, it's just crock pot, large roasts, soups, whole foods.
Almost like how we were eating like 100 years ago.
Yes.
Right? Like that's
Right.
how I think about it. And I think it's really interesting because it's such a common misconception for gut health. Like sometimes people think being vegan is the most like the epitome of health. It's the most healthiest thing you can do, right? And sometimes, like I know for me, when I went vegetarian for like 6 months, not a great choice for me personally. I just didn't work for me and it destroyed my gut. I got like a ton of things from it. It was really, really hard for me versus like eating animal products. Everyone is different. So that is just for me as a bio individual, what works for me. But, it's just so interesting that the things that have stood the test of time of eating animal-based products are also the most healing for our bodies, and the most nutrient dense, versus some other things. And I can imagine that the GAPS diet, because you're starting off slow and you're starting off with the meat stock and sipping on that before kind of graduating to that next level, you're omitting all of the fruits, all of the veggies, all of the grains because they're harder to digest or irritating the gut or the gut lining in some way because of the imbalance or the dysbiosis, right?
Correct. Yes.
Do you ever bring, for example, do you ever bring grains back into the diet? Or is it more of, okay, now you're into the home cooking phase and it's primarily like meat, cooked veggies? Do you stick to that more of like paleo-ish style, or do you bring the nuts and the seeds and the grains back into the mix?
Yes, so correct. So the first thing on just to touch on the vegan part, Dr. Natasha, the founder of the GAPS diet, will talk about this a lot. Just that it's meant for a cleanse. So that's why you might feel really well in those first couple of weeks, but then afterwards, the body starts kind of cannibalizing itself, looking for those nutrients to help rebuild some of those tissues. So in order to, what our body really is sustained on are animal fats and proteins. And then certainly when you get to those that more full GAPS diet in those later stages in the diet, and when the gut is healed, you can start to bring back in some of those foods, but what's called their properly prepared forms. So like soaked, fermented grains. And that's kind of the harder part, is that it's not like something we can just kind of usually go to the store and get. There's a little bit more of a process of doing that at home and a little bit more labor intensive, but it's done so in a way that's what's natural and easier to digest for our body. And so I kind of break down gut health into two different ways. I think there's a diet to eat for healing the gut, and there's a diet to eat for supporting the gut. And once the gut is healed, meaning you have a healed gut lining and you have a healthy microbiome, a nice collection of diverse good bacteria and fungi in the gut, then you eat what I like to call a gut supporting diet, and still incorporating those nutrients that heal the gut lining, those animal fats and proteins. But fiber is a really big part of gut health. It feeds the good bacteria in the gut. So now prebiotics are more prevalent today, which, you have probiotic, which is the bacteria. Then there's prebiotic, essentially that's the food or a type of fiber for the good bacteria to eat and thrive. So fiber is an important part of the diet. Fruits and vegetables and grains are an important part of the diet, as long as the gut can tolerate it and as long as they're in more of a properly prepared form.
Okay, so I want to scale back for a second. You said two different types of foods to eat when you're healing the gut, and then foods to eat when you're maintaining and optimizing the gut, right? How do you know when your gut lining is healed or when your gut is healed? How would somebody know that if they're not doing the poop test and all of that, and they're just kind of going off of how their body's feeling going through these phases?
I think it just depends on the timing and how your body's reacting. So, if you just did something for like a week, it probably didn't give your body enough time to heal. But, if you've been very diligent about it and you've been incorporating all these nutrients to help heal the gut, and you've given your body some time, and you've been through the stages, and you feel better, you notice you're digesting foods better, that your body is its own litmus test for how it's feeling and how much it's healed. And then when you start to incorporate, let's say you start to incorporate some raw vegetables back into your diet or some fiber back into your diet, how your body digests that is a big indicator for how healed the gut is. So if you have a lot of issues digesting it, then, you may not be ready for it yet. But again, that properly prepared form. So, and a lot of times it's just easier for us to consume some of these foods in a cooked manner. So especially like vegetables and high fiber foods are much easier if we were cooking them or having them roasted or in a soup. It's just a little bit easier for the gut to digest. But definitely how you tolerate the food, how you digest it is an indicator of where your gut health is at and how healed the gut is.
Okay, so how do you know if you're digesting food correctly or well? If you're bloating right after you eat, or if you're like, oh gosh, I'm going to the bathroom right after I eat. What are some of those signs? So if someone's listening and they're like, well, I bloat sometimes, or I think I'm digesting well, but I'm not sure. Like, what does that look like for you as a professional? What do you look for?
Yeah, so regularity for sure. I mean, if you're running to the bathroom right after every meal, it's probably not helpful. I would say, bloating after eating, if alternating constipation, diarrhea, like these are all red flags of having some sort of gut dysfunction. So being able to digest your meal well, you don't feel bloated afterwards, you are going to the bathroom more regularly, you're not alternating constipation, diarrhea, running to the bathroom right after your meals. Those types of things are indicators that the gut is working well. But also, if you have any underlying conditions that have led you to heal the gut, that maybe it's like skin issues or it's autoimmune or something like that, how you feel with what drew you to, if it was inflammation, soreness in the muscles in your joints, something like that, checking in with how those symptoms feel for you. For me, with Lyme, the brain fog was the first thing that started to heal for me. And that was the indication like, okay, this is actually working. I said I forgot where I lived driving home from work, and my cognitive function and cognitive clarity and that my memory kind of coming back and my ability to recollect information was so much better in just a few weeks on the GAPS diet. So that to me was an indicator like, okay, this is working. This is the best I've felt, since I had been on antibiotics and was diagnosed. So it's kind of specific to the individual, whatever you have going on, just kind of take note of those symptoms and notice that improvement.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it sounds like the GAPS diet really helped you put your Lyme in remission.
Absolutely. And I would say the diet was probably about 75% of that. I think the remainder is, and I know you talk about this a lot, is lifestyle. Stress has, and clinical research says this, that stress is more damaging on the gut than junk food.
Oh my gosh, stress alone can cause leaky gut. You can be eating all of the cooked veggies and blueberries and bone broth and sauerkraut in the world, but if you are stressed the F out internally, it'll cause dysbiosis in your body.
It's actually interesting because there for a while I was analyzing my clients' microbiomes. So I had one client who was a CrossFitter and an incredible diet. I mean, he couldn't have been more healthy, like just great diet and exercise to all to a T. Then I had another client at the same time, and she was an older woman and had not the greatest diet, a lot more processed food in her diet, but she didn't have a whole lot of stress in her life. She lived kind of like on a farm, and, she had some gut issues, but very minimal stress compared to the gentleman that had inc- crazy levels of stress. And I looked at their microbiome, so I would send in samples and get them back. And she actually had a better snapshot of bacteria in her gut compared to the super high stress client. And, when I say better composition of bacteria, certain species of bacteria are linked to like more inflammation. And she didn't have that as much as him. And I truly attribute that to their lifestyle. She really didn't have a lot of stress, and her diet was okay. Whereas, he had a perfect diet, but the stress levels were through the roof. So stress is a huge part of that. Lifestyle is a big part. And I think for me, the diet was a big part of my healing, but I had to really go through and work through the stress piece of that and have the mindfulness practice. And it's a balance of all of it.
It is a balance of everything. I always say that too. Like nutrition is, like for cancer prevention, for healing, for recovery after cancer, anything, right? It's like a pie. Nutrition is one slice of the pie. It's not the entire pie. And there's so much more that we have to consider than just nutrition. It's a very important piece, right? And a piece that we definitely don't want to ignore, but it's not the whole pie. So what's some of your favorite stress management techniques that you've started incorporating into your lifestyle since all of this?
Gosh, there's so many things. I mean, I did a lot of yoga, a lot of meditation. Some other things that I I brought in acupuncture. I started doing that. I love acupuncture for especially, I recommend it to all my clients. It goes so well with the gut healing protocol because it just taps into that body on an energetic level. So if you have a hard time relaxing, or if you have a hard time getting into meditation or any of the energy work or mindfulness practice, it can help kind of do that for you without really knowing that that's what's going on. You can tap into, certain meridians and organs where maybe there's some stored and stuck emotions that you're not really ready to work through, but you can work through it on an energetic level. So I love acupuncture. I started doing sauna, and that was really helpful. It really helped with a lot of the detoxification, and just spending time in nature, getting outside, being more mindful of where I was spending my time, where am I spending my energy, who I was spending my energy with, what I was spending my energy on, and just being mindful more of taking better care of myself in that aspect. So
Yeah, no, it's so important. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I was going to refer back to your story where you were like, I underwent a lot of stress prior to, finding your Lyme disease and everything like that. And just how much stress can be such a driver or a precursor to obviously so many different diseases, but to overall gut health too. It's just such an important piece of the puzzle. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And there's so many, the good thing about now in 2026, there's so many tools out there that we can have in our toolbox or the ability to just rearrange our day to set it up to help with stress, especially I'm like a very high energy, recovering perfectionist, recovering type A person. And for me, I have to be very intentional about stress management because I can so easily go to the other side and stress myself out super fast or just overwork or whatever. So being very intentional throughout the day, like for me, has helped so much with stress, with my kids, like all of the things.
And our bodies can handle stress, and that's another thing too with moderation. I'm a big fan of moderation. Once the gut is healed, I think, you don't have to live in a bubble. The body can handle stress. We can handle some of these toxins. It's just, we have to make sure we're supporting ourselves on the other end. And having that balance is so key. So having things to kind of offset that, just knowing where your limits are and having a balance is so important.
Totally. And so for the GAPS diet, first of all, is Lyme considered autoimmune?
Not typically, but I feel like it acts almost as if autoimmune. It kind of functions a lot of the same way. It's being in your body essentially for forever and being dormant can kind of function like that, and how the body sort of attacks itself. But generally it's a tick bite from what most research shows.
Okay, so we know the GAPS diet is really great for Lyme disease. Is it good for other diseases or other conditions out there? So if anyone's listening and, for example, like I reversed my Hashimoto's. I had Hashimoto's for a couple of years, and I went on like a very similar kind of diet, but like who is this diet for? What conditions is it for?
Honestly, anybody with anything. Like it's not specific to, it's not specific to anybody with, any ailments. I had Lyme, it helped me with that. It's a diet designed to heal the gut, but everybody that has had success on GAPS has been dealing with, everything from autoimmune to cancer to, really anything, mental health. It's the success stories on the GAPS diet are just incredible. It's from everything.
I love that. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it too, as you're talking, this diet would probably be really good for people who are just coming out of chemo. Like when I came out of chemo, not only, I had so many rounds of really hard chemo, and then I was on antibiotics for 9 months, like 2 or 3 different types of antibiotics, right? No one told me to take a probiotic. There was no talk about any of that. And when I got out, my gut was so completely destroyed. Like I mentioned, anxiety, I had like debilitating anxiety, PTSD, but also like malabsorption issues. I would eat and the food would go in my stomach and just sit there. And I had no hunger pains. I couldn't feel the food actually getting broken down into my body. I couldn't feel it digesting. It was honestly, it scared me. It was the weirdest. If you've never had gut issues, which I never did or that I knew of, to eat something and have it sit in your stomach and never have hunger pains or ever have, when your body, your stomach grumbles and makes noises like after you eat or when you're getting really hungry, when it's like fully emptied out. I had none of that for weeks and weeks, and it just scared me. And my appetite was so gone. And then, as you know, if you are not absorbing your food, you are not getting energy. You're having the brain fog and the chemo brain and stuff like that. So for anyone that's listening that's coming out of treatments, this might be a really good option because no matter what, your gut is destroyed if you're coming out of treatments like radiation, chemo, all of that. Even if you're taking a probiotic, you're still, it's killing everything in our body, not just the cancer cells. So this might be a really good option to start with to help your healing journey.
Yeah. And I will say, I know it can be a little bit intimidating to look at the full, elimination and reintroduction of GAPS, especially when, we're not feeling well. So what I did initially was I started on sort of kind of the full GAPS diet and then worked my way backwards. I just started incorporating the broths, the meat stock, GAPS style cooking techniques. And then I noticed I started feeling better. Then that gave me a little bit of energy to actually tackle the stages. So I've worked with this with a lot of my clients too, where we'll start kind of GAPS like eating, GAPS style cooking.
So tell me about that. What's this GAPS style cooking and eating? What does that look like?
So just incorporating those meat stocks, more animal proteins, animal fats, soups. I love soups, blended soups. I call them pre-digested. So they're cooked, they're blended together. They're much easier on the gut to digest. So say, for a day, you would do some broth in the morning, depending on, where your digestion is at. You have something for breakfast. You could do like a soup. You could do wherever you're at. Maybe if we're doing full GAPS, maybe you can tolerate some eggs and some kraut. Then, lunch, we have some cooked animal proteins, some meat, maybe some more soup in there as like a snack. I love like a carrot, ginger, butternut squash, blend that up and just have that kind of throughout the week. And all throughout the day, you're sipping on broths. Then dinner, maybe you've prepped a large roast, something like that, with some roasted vegetables. That's GAPS style cooking and eating. Cooking with ghee, we do a lot of clarified butter and sea salt, and you can do pepper, you can do all sorts of herbs that to season everything with. And it's just kind of like that style of cooking, that style of eating, and just sort of getting familiar with everything and familiar with that. And generally my clients will feel a little bit better on a few weeks of that type of eating. And we're not so crazy restrictive. It's just, all right, let's try to stick to this. And then they have a little bit more energy and a little bit of enthusiasm for it, that they're ready to tackle the stages. And not everybody needs to necessarily go through the stages. It kind of just depends on where your health is at, what issues you're having. A lot of times, some of my clients just will get better on just sort of eating that full GAPS diet, supplementing with a digestive enzyme and a probiotic, taking some L-glutamine to help with the gut lining, and that's all they need. Other times people are a little bit more serious. So those stages can be very helpful. So it kind of just depends, but you can certainly start with that GAPS style of eating and cooking to help kind of dip your toe in the water and get started from there.
Yeah, I love that. I kind of ate that way too after my Hashimoto's diagnosis, and it changed everything for me. When I eliminated gluten and dairy, it completely changed everything. When I started eating that way, I felt just such a shift. And I think you're right. When people start to feel better, you become more motivated and more like, okay, I can try the next step. It gives you some encouragement and I love the fact that like you don't live in this restriction, forever, right? There's a time and a place for everything, and you can kind of use it and move forward, but still like lean back on the principles of the nutrient dense foods and like the cooked vegetables, the things that are always going to be there to help nourish the gut.
It's kind of like my little first aid kit go-to, because we can all get off track, we travel, the holidays, we go through stress, life happens. So it's always something that's that foundational piece to kind of get things back on track too. Like if you're feeling down or you get sick, you bring back in the broths, the soups, the cooked meats, the cooked vegetables, the fermented foods, and that helps to just get things back on track.
I wonder why, if that, how like whenever you're sick, you always kind of crave soup or everyone makes soup. I wonder if it's just your body's like intuition knowing like this is what I need to heal to feel better.
Absolutely. Our bodies are so intuitive. I mean, our bodies know. And I distinctly remember the first time I actually made broth and I took a sip and I was in this corner of my apartment and I was so sick. And I took one sip and I thought, this is going to heal me. I mean, I just distinctly remember it going through my body. Like my body knew and I couldn't get enough of it. Like I just drank the whole thing. And so your body knows when you start giving your body the nutrients it needs to heal, repair, and sustain, it responds.
Do you think that you can overdo eating fermented foods? Like eating too much of fermented foods could also harm the gut? I think I did
Yes.
that, by the way. I'm pretty sure that's what happened to me a few months ago, where I was eating too much and I knew I had a gut, like something was going on. And then thankfully I repaired it. Like I know enough to like know how to go through and repair it. But I was like, oh, that's kind of important too, right? We don't want to like overdo it and make sure we're having like the healthy balance of setting up your plate in like the correct way. And fermented veggies is a condiment, not the meal, and things like that, right?
Yeah. And the more is not the merrier when it comes to probiotics, especially like when you look for the supplement, the CFU, which is like the unit of measurement for probiotics, the colony forming unit. I always like to go more towards the lower amount, and then you can always build on that versus starting off too high. And, sometimes people will think, okay, let's just get all the crazy bacteria in here. And it's not the more is not the merrier when it comes to gut health and bacteria. So starting off slow and then building is important.
Yeah, I feel like that's been the theme, right? Like being just very intentional with food and very intentional with the healing process and kind of like slowing down and checking in with the body and everything too. I think that's another thing that people don't realize that much with gut health is like when you're eating, taking a few breaths before you eat, really making sure you're in that like rest and digest mode and not like in a super high stress mode, because it does affect, how we digest and how our body's absorbing the food. And people who are always like rushing around and standing and eating, it can create its own issues.
Well, and your body doesn't necessarily, that rest to digest is so important because your body has to be in that parasympathetic state to release the enzymes that are needed to break down our foods. And gut health starts with digestion. If you're not breaking down your foods properly, everything downstream is going to be affected. So they're not going to be properly absorbed. Then you're getting undigested foods into the system. That's going to create a bunch of issues. So digesting your foods, number one, is the most important part of gut health. It all starts with digestion. So that's slowing down. That's, being in that right frame of mind when we eat our foods, make sure that the body knows like this is time to eat. And, sometimes it can be helpful supplementing with an enzyme because most of us have too little stomach acid as compared to too much, especially if you've gone through any sort of antibiotic use or treatments that just wipe out our enzymes. Can be helpful to bring that in to help build up those stomach acid levels.
You know what I've been using to build up my stomach acid levels lately is digestive bitters.
Oh, that's fantastic. Love that.
It like literally repaired so much for me. Like I'm obsessed now. And I think it's so great and so natural, Sometimes it's just like we're all taking so many supplements, or there's so many supplements out there where people get overwhelmed about what supplements to get. So I love the digestive bitters because it's just the dropper and it's natural.
Those are so good.
What are some of your favorite probiotics or digestive enzymes, like as an expert now?
Like the brands or like.
Yeah, or brands that you trust. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like Zenwise No Bloat is one of the digestive enzymes that I really like. It contains, a few different enzymes that, need to break down your fats, proteins, carbs, but it also contains a blend in there, an herbal blend that will help to reduce bloating and digestive discomfort. And I found that to be pretty helpful for a lot of my clients. And I like Biome, Biohm. I like their probiotic. It's a lower CFU, and it's just very specific with the species of bacteria in there. So it doesn't contain a crazy amount of different ones. It's very specialized, and then it also contains fungi, Aspergillosis. So you have to have that nice balance of bacteria and fungi. And then it contains an enzyme that helps to, an amylase that helps to break down digestive plaque. So, earlier I talked about when you have an overgrowth of pathogens, they team up together and they build this plaque. Well, you can be taking a probiotic all day long, but if you have that digestive plaque in there, it's not really going to do a whole lot. So it helps to kind of break that down and release so the beneficial bacteria can thrive. But, I think those are like my top two when I'm working with my clients that have been the most universal effective. But the gut is like a thumbprint. It is completely unique to you. So, while one thing might work for someone, it might not work for you and what you have going on. And I will say, I think food is always the best way to help support. So like I love the bitters for helping to support digestion. Pineapple contains bromelain. That's an enzyme that helps you digest your foods. Sauerkraut also helps you digest your foods, even just taking a little swig of that. Broth, sipping on broth with your meals can help you digest your foods. And then incorporating the fermented foods like kraut and, even yogurt. I like making homemade yogurt. It's super easy, culturing your own dairy, a little bit higher in that probiotic content. Those are kind of like your food as medicine approaches to a probiotic. And I think those are always going to be the most effective and most helpful.
Yeah, agreed. Because you can absorb it. You can absorb food better. Sometimes if you don't know the state of your gut and you're sitting there just taking supplements, you don't know if those supplements are working. You don't even know if it's landing in your stomach. You don't know if it's opening up, right? It's hard. So understanding like we can dabble in food and use food. A long time ago, we did not have probiotics. We had to use food and lean into all of these things and herbs, right? And like all of these other alternatives. So I know that you also created your own gut reset program, right? What inspired you to create that?
So it's based a lot on the GAPS diet. Again, it's kind of like those GAPS principles of cleaner eating, easier to digest foods. It's just a little bit easier to follow. It's just something that, when I noticed a lot of my clients were maybe they healed their gut and then they went on vacation, or they kind of forgot everything that they had learned on the protocol and went back to their other ways. It's like just a little reset, like, don't forget, just stick to these principles, get things back on track. So it's easier to digest foods, soups, smoothies, broths, proteins, animal fats and proteins, and then some supplements, just the ones that I mentioned, can be helpful with an enzyme, a probiotic, and just really helps to get things back on track. It's a 3-day gut reset. It's pretty easy, but you could use that for however long. It's essentially just the principles to get the gut back on track.
I love that. I think everyone should do a gut reset like a couple times a year because we're just shifting so much. We're exposed to so much, or, having stressful bouts in life, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a 3-day gut reset and then includes recipes, the instructions, and kind of walks you through how to navigate those 3 days, or if you want to do it for a week or something like that.
Yes. And it's free. It's available on my website to download. And it just kind of walks you through those. It's basically taken from the GAPS diet, just some of those easy to digest foods, some of those principles that kind of help to get the gut back on track if you've, been off of your diet, or, even if you're just looking to get into gut health, but you don't know where to start. It helps to give you some principles to help start incorporating some of those things into your routine.
I love that. Maybe I'll link that in the show notes for people too, so they can download it and get a little taste of it. Yeah. And one thing I personally loved trying lately was your meal delivery service.
Oh, thank you. Yay.
You sent me some amazing meals, and I love that. So tell me about that. Like, how did you get into the meal delivery piece of it, and what makes your meals different from like a typical meal prep service?
So, I, really got into it because I do feel like gut healthy foods should be affordable and accessible to everybody. And especially in the prepared meals or something that's quick and easy for people, I feel like we should have more of those foods accessible to everybody. But it was really my clients, honestly, like they, just working with clients and working with people on gut health. And it was like, you don't have any excuses. Like I've made it easy for you. You can just order these meals and easily follow this protocol. And for those that, because I do meal prep locally for people or cook for people locally that are going through the GAPS diet. So this was kind of like my way to help those clients that I can't cook for. But it's kind of turned into something different where I feel like it's helpful to all sorts of people. It's busy moms. It's actually their kids are enjoying the meals they take up to their basketball practice. And I love hearing stories of how other people find it useful. They're using it as gifts, maybe for their elderly parents, sending people meals. Maybe they're not feeling well, or they're having, they're going through something. And so it's cool to see, where it has gone and how people find them useful. But I do feel like we should all have access to gut healthy, clean meals, and not have any surprises when we get our food. It's like we shouldn't have to go to the store and play detective on every label. And it's frustrating and it's exhausting. It's like we should just be able to trust what's in our food. And it should be accessible to everybody and affordable. And so I think that's, my big thing with food and just helping I love, and even a lot of the brands that I support that feel like they've come from people who just wanted to see the change. So they started something themselves. And that's kind of how I feel about my meals, is just trying to be what I wish I would have had at that time, when I was looking for cleaner foods.
For sure. And it's definitely needed. Like you said, it is so hard to go to the stores and play detective and figure out if this is something good or not good. And it's true. Like we were eating your meals when we have activities all the time for our two kids. So basketball practice was happening in a half hour. And it was just like, okay, great. This just arrived this week. Let's do it. What are like two of like your favorite meals from your meal kit?
Well, they're changing all the time too, which I love. So everything is seasonal. I think some of the most popular ones people love, the firecracker chicken and the Mongolian beef are two of the most popular ones. I love the chicken tinga, which is like kind of like Mexican. It's just shredded chicken with some herbs, some spices, and then some sauteed vegetables. But everything arrives fresh. Everything is made to order. And you can also freeze them, which I love. So I'll always have a few in the freezer because I do feel like we make our worst food decisions when we're tired, we're hungry. We'll just order something or grab something quick. And so being able to have those has saved me, especially if I'm coming back from like a trip or something and there's nothing in the fridge. At least I know I always have something clean and healthy and accessible.
I couldn't agree more. When we are hangry, when we are so busy, when we're tired, we literally just grab for convenience. So that's why I think I always preach meal prepping is just so important. Having food in your fridge that you can just grab and warm is so important. So you have nutrient dense things accessible all the time. It keeps you on track. It does. And you feel better. Sorry, but nobody's eating a Big Mac out there and being like, I feel great after that meal. No, you feel like shit. You feel like shit. You feel bloated. You feel gross.
I will add to that. Conversely, no one has healed their gut and said they don't feel better. No one is eating to support gut health. Yeah. And saying, you know what? I healed my gut and I don't think I feel any better. I don't know. I haven't heard that yet.
Well, coming from someone who I feel like I'm always healing my gut in some way, shape, or form once a year, it's worth it. It's worth it. And I almost feel like once you change your palate, once you change your eating habits to support nutrient-dense foods, nutrition, you crave it, and then you just feel better. Like if anyone ever told me that I would be gluten-free or dairy-free or even off coffee, I'd be like, you are insane. Like I would always say, I'll never give up pizza. Like I'll never give up cheese. Like I love it. But let me tell you something. When I got off it and I realized how good I felt off of it, it was such a game changer because sometimes we don't realize how in it we are or how much like crap we feel until we remove things and start healing and realize, okay, like I don't have to walk around feeling a certain way all the time. And there is something I can do and something I have control over. But the good thing about my audience, I feel like with preventers and survivors, at least with the survivors, we all are at a point where we're like, we'll do anything to feel better and to keep cancer away. And the best thing that we can do to support that is our gut health and balancing our blood sugar, supporting our immune system and bringing down chronic inflammation in our body by regulating our blood sugar. Those are the two most important things. So I love it when my clients come and see me. It's like, they're ready. We're like, sure, I'll do whatever. Like, as if I don't have to go through that experience ever again. And so, and the same with people who are ready to prevent or having a gene walking around with or have autoimmune, like, I feel like I went through it again with autoimmune. Like you realize, okay, like your health can go to deeper levels and you don't have to be so restrictive. You don't have to live in a bubble all the time, but there's simple shifts that can be made. So as we close up with this conversation, what's one thing that you wish more people understood about gut health?
That it doesn't have to be difficult. I think that there's so much conflicting information out there and just so much information. I feel bad for anybody that's just kind of like getting into it because it's like, where do I start? What do I believe? Just that it's simple. The foundations of gut health are really quite simple, and you don't have to change everything at once. Just starting to incorporate little bits at a time, just maybe starting with some broth, starting to clean up, your products a little bit, just start reading to read the labels and selecting better quality ingredients. Just those little changes make a huge difference. So it doesn't have to be so overwhelming. And oftentimes when the easier that we keep it, the better off it is.
Totally. And it's so true because gut health in general feels overwhelming because it's so big and it's so complex. The gut is so complex, but when you break it down, I think you did a really good job breaking it down and making it simple, right? Starting off with slowly incorporating, even before you start quitting something, incorporating something better and letting that be the motivation and set the foundation for continuous, repair to a certain point too.
Yes.
So I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, tell everyone where they can find you, especially if anyone wants to do the 3-day reset or become a client. Where can they find and reach you?
So website is just fairygutmother.com, and then social media is @fairygutmother.
Love it. Thank you so much, Carley.
Yeah, thank you for having me.